The Chargers have made the surprise hiring of the offseason so far, bringing in Adam Gase, and my first thought was keep that man away from Justin Herbert.
You are Locked On Chargers, your daily podcast on the Los Angeles Chargers. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
What is up, man? Welcome into the Locked On Chargers podcast. I'm your host, Daniel Wade, joined as always by my co-host, David Droegemeier, and we've been covering the Chargers now for 10 seasons, but this is our 8th year as the host of the Locked On Chargers podcast, bringing you your team every day as part of the #1 sports podcast network. David, what do we got today?
Daniel, the Chargers are trying to fill out their coaching staff and a surprise hire, big one, with Adam Gase returning back to the NFL after a multiple-year hiatus. We'll have to see how that goes. We'll talk about that, along with several other coaching hires, a new running backs coach, a new coach on the defensive side, a lot of movement. We got to talk about it all.
Yeah, and several coaches that the Chargers are parting ways with or have found other jobs elsewhere, as this staff seems to be having a lot more movement than we've seen over the last few weeks. So today's episode is brought to you by FanDuel. The winter games are on, and there's no better way to follow them with a bet on FanDuel. FanDuel, play your game. Dave, this is something that was floating out there over the weekend, and the Chargers' interest in potentially bringing back Adam Gase, which was kind of a name that I never thought we would hear again, and who completely kind of fell off the NFL map after his last stint with the New York Jets. But this was a really surprising hire, for sure. I mean, this is kind of what the report is. Pretty ambiguous as far as what his role is going to be, but this from Ian Rappaport. He's back after a 5-year hiatus. Adam Gase returns to coaching in the NFL, joining the Chargers as an assistant, focusing on the passing game. Sources say Chris Rim also said that he is just an offensive assistant, which means it likely isn't the passing game coordinator role, which is a very hot and trendy role, and a really high up there as far as the pipeline of getting better jobs in head coaching and offensive coordinator jobs. But it's just interesting, man. It's something I didn't see coming. Like, obviously, if we're coming up with lists of guys to add to this staff, especially with no real connections to Mike McDaniel, this was pretty far down the list of guys I would have said.
Yeah, I mean, like, where did this come from? It seemed like this was way out of left field. Like, when I saw the reports of this coming out, I'm like, why? Like,
yeah.
Like, it's been 5 years since this guy's been in the NFL, and the last time we saw him, he was head coach of the Jets after a 2-14 season. He was let go and, you know, basically escaped into the abyss of trying to hide from the world after some pretty bad performances out there. But I guess for me, when I looked at it and analyzed it, it's like, okay, well, is he a coordinator? No. Is he, you know, even a passing game coordinator? No. Like, he's an offensive assistant. So I guess in that, you know, just looking at it in that way, I feel like it's okay because I don't know how much of an impact he's going to have on the day-to-day operations of the offense.
Yeah, I mean, I think the thing is, too, that it's always important to remember, this is Mike McDaniel's offense, right?
Yeah.
Like, he's going to be calling the plays, which means, you know, the offensive coordinator is a little less, or, you know, like the passing game coordinator is a little less important, right? Whoever's under that, a little less important, because you have the top guy being able to actually call the plays and build his offense. So
yeah,
I'd say this is probably on par with the Mark Trestman hiring in 2024, looking for, you know, some sort of senior analyst of some sort, you know, some sort of offensive assistant in that way. But yeah, I mean, this is a guy that, weirdly enough, you know, had a failing stint with the Dolphins as a head coach after being a hot offense coordinator himself once upon a time. Then immediately was hired by the Jets to be their head coach and had the crazy eyes interview that I'll never forget because it was terrifying. And then it was kind of like, man, it's hard to kind of take this guy seriously. It ends up being a disaster. He had Sam Darnold after he was just drafted. You said they ended a 2-14 season in 2020, which is the last time he coached, but had Sam Darnold in his second and third seasons, in which Darnold went 9-16 under Gase and threw 28 touchdowns and 24 interceptions. I mean, as a head coach, his offense has never finished higher than 17th in scoring and ranked 26th or worse in every other season. So it wasn't great as a head coach. I mean, it's probably fair to say better off as an offensive coach than a head coach, as history would say. But at the same time, I think with Mike McDaniel, as he builds the staff and just knowing that Mike McDaniel has always kind of been part of some of the top offenses in the league and has shown that he can lead one of those. I think you give him a benefit of the doubt that maybe you wouldn't to an offensive coordinator with maybe a little less experience.
Yeah, no question about it. I mean, and that's the thing to keep in mind is Mike McDaniel is the guy running the show. He's going to be the guy running the offense. He's going to be the one that's going to be setting everything up. And, he's formulating his staff. He's putting together a staff that's going to help him be able to disseminate this offense down to players who are learning it for the first time. And so you want to have guys that are going to be able to have different perspectives at different levels, but also be well-versed in what you're trying to bring to the table. And so Mike McDaniel had to feel good that Adam Gase was going to be on that same page and be able to help advance his offense, an offense that we all expect to be of the cutting edge variety in the NFL.
Yeah, I mean, I think at least the bare minimum of what he's telling you is he respects him as an offensive mind, right?
Yeah.
And it's a long time ago, but he was the offensive coordinator for a couple of the best offenses we've ever seen at this level. Offensive coordinator for the Broncos in 2013 and 2014, but in 2013 was the year Peyton Manning threw 55 touchdowns and 5,477 yards in a 16-game season. The next season, Manning threw 39 touchdowns and had 4,700 yards. And then the next year after that is actually when they won the Super Bowl, and then Peyton Manning, I think, had 9 touchdowns and 17 interceptions. It was the corpse of Peyton Manning, more like. But yeah, I mean, there was some good a long time ago, so it's hard to kind of fully buy into that as someone that's going to make a big difference in what they're trying to build here, especially not coming from a Shanahan tree, right? Because you're saying, hey, he's got to disseminate the offense. Sure, this isn't his offense, right? No. So there's a certain kind of learning curve that he's going to have himself. Did have Ben Johnson as an assistant coach while he was in Miami for a time. But yeah, obviously better as an assistant than a head coach. I'm not going to put too much stock into it, but I think Mike McDaniel has my benefit of the doubt as far as who he wants to hire for this offensive coaching staff, especially if it's a smaller role like it seems like this is right now. But one more move here from Matt Zenitz, who's a great follow, and we're going to be saying his name a lot today.
Yeah.
It's considered a strong possibility the Chargers hired Dolphins offensive assistant Max McCaffrey potentially as running backs coach, who is a Dolphins assistant from 2023 to 2025, David. And it also means that another Chargers coach is not going to be with them any longer.
Yeah, Max McCaffrey is going to be the running backs coach for the Chargers, taking the place of Kyle McDonald, who was the Chargers running back coach for the last couple of seasons under the kind of Greg Roman offense. And you had to know that this was going to be a move that was going to happen, right? You're going to want to bring in your guys. And I think this, speaks more to my point when I was talking about Adam Gase for Max McCaffrey is he's worked with Mike McDaniel the last several years in very close connection. So he knows the offense backwards and forwards, especially, when it comes to the running backs and the running game, which has been extremely successful the last several years. I just take a look at what Devon Achane has done, and even Raheem Mostert before that, they had some big years over there in Miami. So that to me is definitely not a bad move. And if that name sounds familiar, yes, it is that McCaffrey, the brother of the superstar who is in San Francisco.
Yeah, Christian McCaffrey's brother, Luke McCaffrey's brother. There's McCaffrey's all over the place, but he's interesting because before his time, because his first NFL job was as a Dolphins assistant. Before that, he was the Northern Colorado coach for a couple of years, where he started as a wide receiver coach and then became their offensive coordinator after his first year there, and was there in 2021, 2022 as their offensive coordinator, which obviously small school, but really good experience to have. You wonder what it means that Sanjay Lal, what this means for him, because you would think Max McCaffrey would probably be a wide receiver coach because that's what he played in college, and that seems to be what he worked most closely with in Miami. Maybe that means Sanjay Lal is safe, but there's been a lot of movement on this coaching staff, so it's hard to say. But obviously, someone they really wanted to get in the building, a bright kind of young offensive mind they see a lot of potential in. And when you kind of have the track record that Jesse Minter had, right, and Mike McDonald before him, and kind of this pipeline, it's like any kind of guy like this, or even now on the offensive side, when you know what that Shanahan tree brings to the table, right, you get a little excited about it. And you wonder what this guy can do, because talking about someone who knows it, to your point, yes, he coached under Mike McDaniel. He also played for Kyle Shanahan in 2018 and was actually part of the offense they're going to be installing in 2026 and beyond, hopefully. But That's not the only help the Chargers got in the running game, because they did bring in another offensive specialist specializing in the run game, and Chris O'Leary seems to have made his first hire as far as somebody to bring onto his defensive coaching staff again, and all that and more in today's Locked On Chargers podcast. The Winter Games are officially here, and if you're anything like us, you're locking in for events you only get to see on the biggest stage every 4 years. And that's why following the Winter Games on FanDuel just makes sense. From medal counts to individual events to finding your angle on the sports you care most about, FanDuel gives you more ways to stay connected to the action. The drama of curling matches that start slow and somehow get intense fast, and I've been locked in on curling more than I ever thought I would be. Speed skating races decided by inches. Hockey games that feel different right from the opening face-off. That is easily what I'm most excited about. Hopefully a gold medal match between USA Hockey and Canada Hockey to battle things out after things left off last year in the Four Nations. But even niche events become must-watch when you're fully locked into the competition. The Winter Games are on, and there's no better way to follow them than with FanDuel. FanDuel, play your game. David, we have more moves on this coaching carousel to get into, because the Chargers were very active over the last 4 or 5 days when we were like, hey, everything seems pretty status quo right now as far as the guys that they have on this staff. Maybe Mike McDaniel wants to keep everyone on offense. Maybe Chris O'Leary really does think they'll keep the entire defensive squad together. But there was another hire, and this is from Matt Zenitz as well, who says the Chargers are expected to hire Dolphins run game specialist Chandler Henley. Sources tell CBS Sports. Worked for Miami under Mike McDaniel the last 4 seasons. Now expected to be part of McDaniel's offensive staff with the Chargers. So we talked about them getting a new running backs coach. This seems more from a schematic standpoint, David, someone that's going to come in to help the Chargers learn a completely different running scheme than the one they've been running over the last several years.
Yes, sir. And as we see quite often with coaching hires and staffs, it's all about who you know. And this one is for somebody who goes way back, as he actually was teammates with Mike McDaniel at Yale. So
crazy.
Yeah, very, very, very long-standing relationship. His coaching career kind of started at Vanderbilt as a graduate assistant. He was there for several years. Then he made his way to the NFL with the Tennessee Titans for a few years as an offensive quality control coach, focusing on the offensive line. Also enjoyed stints with the Atlanta Falcons and, the Miami Dolphins, where he was really wearing a lot of different hats. Started as an assistant quarterbacks coach to a senior offensive assistant, and then finally that run game specialist in 2025. A guy who has been with Mike McDaniel through, many different stops, or, playing in college, has known him for a very, very long time, has worked with him the last 4 years, and just another guy to help bring on this offense, and, install some new rushing concepts, hopefully taking advantage of the outsides of the defense, which we know they did exceptionally well in Miami, and what we saw Omarion Hampton do pretty well here with the Chargers.
Yeah, and we've both been bullish on what Omarion Hampton can be in this offense, and this is just somebody to help, bring that to fruition. When you have a totally different running style than the one that you had the year before, like I'm totally okay with the Chargers kind of over hiring.
Oh yeah,
on that side of the ball, and kind of just giving Mike McDaniel whatever he wants there, and specializing it if you have to. And it's interesting too, because when Butch Barry took the job, he did take the Chargers offensive line coach job, but he didn't get the run game coordinator title. And that could be because Andy Bischoff had it, right? Now Andy Bischoff, as we're going to talk about later, they're parting ways with him. That's an open title. Could that be who this is here, right? And he gets that role? Potentially it is. It would be a promotion for him compared to what he was already. But now you have Butch Barry. Now you have, obviously, now Chandler Henley both working. I mean, 2 Henleys is going to be interesting for sure on the between him and Dayon. But this is something that, you're hoping to see. Like that. Like, I didn't want Mike McDaniel to come in and have to work with Greg Roman's staff.
Yeah,
right?
now bring your guys.
If you're going to be teaching this, it's hard for me to imagine the guys that you had installing the Greg Roman offense were going to be the best ones to install Mike McDaniel's offense. Like, it just never really made sense. And I thought that Tyler Schoen put out something pretty cool about this too, because if he is a run game specialist, these are some of the guys that he's worked with over the last several years. Derrick Henry in his time with Tennessee, 2,027 total yards. Cordarrelle Patterson had an 1,166 yard season with him on the coaching staff. And obviously, Devon Achane, 238 yards last season. So someone that is very, has worked with some very, very productive running backs, now gets to be a part, at least with Max McCaffrey more than likely, and working with Omarion Hampton, but much more, I think, on the schematic side of things, trying to kind of design this run game and teach it to these players who are going to be learning a new system again, right? So I like it. This is something that feels like what you need, the synergy you kind of need to have success early on, right? Because that's really what this is about, is having guys who can teach it, having guys that can help you kind of shake off the rust, or, get things moving more quickly when you're trying to do this, so it doesn't take 4 or 5 games in a season.
And we've seen what it looks like when they don't do that, right?
Yeah.
When Brandon Staley got hired as the Chargers head coach, he didn't really bring anybody from the Rams staff at all. He just, grabbed guys from all over the place, and I feel like that had an effect because the defense was extremely complicated. We heard that, and it felt like these guys didn't know where they needed to be. And I think this time around, where we've seen it with Jesse Minter, right, bringing in his staff, bringing in like a large amount of those guys, and they were able to hit the ground running, and they found success right away, and it was repeatable success. So I'm all for Mike McDaniel making sure that he has all of the guys that he needs to be able to go out there and compose this offense to the highest possible level.
Well, and we know the issues that Mike McDaniel had with his offense, right? And it didn't feel like, the running game coordinator and the offensive line coach were to blame for it. I mean, sometimes there's only so much you can do with the players you have, especially with the quarterback that you have, in my opinion. But let's talk about Chris O'Leary's seemingly first hire on the defensive side. We know that he told us at his press conference that he basically wanted to keep as many of the defensive staff in place as he possibly could. But this also comes from Matt Zenitz, who says Chargers are set to hire Vanderbilt Nicholls coach Jimmy Thompson. Sources tell CBS Sports will work with the defensive backs group. The ex-Notre Dame linebacker worked at Vandy the last 4 years and garnered college defensive coordinator interest recently, now ultimately headed to the NFL level with the Chargers. This is interesting, David. Very vague role. I'd have to think it's probably similar to what he was doing in college, working more with Nicholls, working more with just that slot position specifically. But also interesting, right? Because like these young defensive minds, it's like you kind of get excited when you see these young guys who they're kind of telling you and knighting to a certain extent, hey, this is one of those up-and-coming guys.
I mean, hey, for him to be the age that he is, to be getting defensive coordinator looks already in college, I think bodes very well for his prospects as a coach moving forward. And obviously, whenever you get a chance to get that call to go to the big show, right, you're going to take it, right? This is the opportunity for him to be able to continue to grow his coaching career. And, he started out as a grad assistant and, then did a couple of other, roles within that realm. And, we'll see what he's able to do with a very, very talented Chargers defensive staff who have a lot of great coaches. And he's got a lot of big shoes to fill in that side of the football, as the Chargers have been one of the better defenses in the NFL the last few seasons.
Yeah, absolutely. And I mean, it's all about relationships like we talked about. O'Leary coached under Vanderbilt coach Clark Lee when they were both at Notre Dame together. So there's some crossover there. And O'Leary and Thompson cross-passed when the latter was playing linebacker for Notre Dame in 2018, which means he also spent time with Mike Elston at Notre Dame as well. So somebody they obviously know well, an up-and-coming name on the defensive side of things here for sure, which kind of shows you kind of the disparity between like someone like Chris O'Leary leaving the Chargers to go be a college defensive coordinator, and someone like this who, instead of trying to be a defensive coordinator at the collegiate level, is like, hey, let me go get my feet wet in the NFL a little bit and see what I can learn there. But one of the guys that he coached in that nickel position at Vanderbilt was Randon Fontenette, who in 2024 had 3.5 sacks, 8 tackles for loss, while also racking up another 8 pass breakups and an interception. 8 pass breakups and 8 tackles for loss in the same season.
That's
not
awesome.
Something you see a lot of, but it sounds very Derwin James-like.
That's what I was going to say, man. That was the first name on my mind.
Yeah, I think the thing is like safeties and nickels are asked to do very, very different things, right? It's why the Chargers moved Derwin down there so he could be much more involved, not just in the passing game, but also the running game as well. And it makes more sense to me to have something like this because, as we know now, Adam Fuller is still in place as the safeties coach. Steve Klinkscale is still in charge of the cornerbacks and the defensive back coach, as they title him. This feels like someone that could be brought in to help, mainly that nickel position that the Chargers have where Derwin plays, and helping that position specifically, which is asked some different things. So I like the hire. Anytime, you're getting someone like Chris O'Leary who's giving the sign off on these things, you're kind of excited to see how it plays out, even for someone that's a little less experienced than someone like Jesse Minter was before him. But we still have more to get into, because new coaches also means some old coaches are making their moves and going their separate ways as well. So we're going to talk about 3 different coaches that are moving on from the Chargers, including Andy Bischoff, who had one of the funnier quotes of any of the Chargers in the Greg Roman era. We're getting into that and more in today's Locked On Chargers podcast. If you've ever hired someone who looked good on paper but wasn't the right fit, you know how important that is. When you want candidates who truly match what you're looking for, trust is always important, and if you're hiring, Indeed is all you need. Stop struggling to get your job post seen on other sites. Indeed's sponsored jobs put your post at the top of the page and help you reach the right candidates faster. Instead of struggling to get your job post seen, Indeed sponsored jobs helps your listing stand out and reach quality candidates faster, and that's one of the big things here is getting the right people to look at your job. You need the job to be seen because you don't want it to be sitting there, but you also don't want to have to fill it again in a couple of months. And that is one thing that Indeed brings, is better qualified candidates. And according to the Indeed data, sponsored jobs posted directly on Indeed are 90% more likely to report a hire than non-sponsored jobs. Listeners of this show get a $75 sponsored job credit to help give your job the premium placement it deserves at Indeed.com/LockedOnNFL. Just go to Indeed.com/LockedOnNFL right now and support the show by saying you heard about Indeed on this podcast. Terms and conditions apply. Hiring, do it the right way with Indeed. David, we talked about some of the new additions to the Chargers. Surprising, exciting, a lot of different ways to describe how this coaching carousel has played out for the Chargers since they've decided on their offensive and defensive coordinators in the aftermath of that. But what we haven't really heard, very much of at least, was who the guys who were leaving the building were until very recently. And one of the first ones that's come out now is Andy Bischoff, who I think title-wise, after, the offensive line coach and your offensive coordinator are fired, probably the most significant, because he held the title of the Chargers tight end coach and also their run game coordinator. And the report is coming out here from Matt Zenas, who says the Chargers and run game coordinator / tight ends coach Andy Bischoff are expected to part ways. Sources tell CBS Sports, means the team is set to have 5 new offensive coaches next season, which that's the reality we're living in, David. And Andy Bischoff, which makes a lot of sense, is heading for greener pastures.
Maybe greener pastures, but yeah, I think it was just
different pastures.
Yeah, different pastures for sure. I think it's just another move for, with Mike McDaniel, when he said in his introductory press conference, basically like, hey, I'm going to assess the staff. We're going to see, who is kind of going to be in line with my vision and what I want to do, and who's going to work with what I am going to instill, and who's not, right? And, this happens all the time. It's just part of the overhaul and the changing of the guard. And, with Andy Bischoff, his time with the Chargers is going to end. And I feel like, he'll probably be able to hold his hat on what Aronde Gadsden II was able to do this past season in his rookie year. He was fantastic. I'm sure, he's going to be able to stake a claim in what he was able to do here. But yeah, there's going to be a new tight ends coach for the Chargers next season.
Yeah, and that's the interesting thing here to me, is it does open up 2 titles that the Chargers can now give elsewhere. Obviously, they'll need a new tight ends coach, so it'll be interesting to see who Mike McDaniel fills that role with. But it also opens up that run game coordinator spot as well, assuming that they're not going to give 2 titles to the same person, right? And so that, probably makes sense if you're bringing in a guy like Chandler Henley, and that's coming out now, right?
Yeah.
And I think for the most part, like, saying they're parting ways at this point basically means the Chargers are moving on from them. Like,
yeah.
In most of these cases, with some exceptions, I think for sure, and we'll talk about one later on. But I do think this was a move on the Charger side, and one that always made sense, because it didn't really make sense, especially at tight end, when you're so incorporated not only in the passing game but also the running game, and just a lot of coaching that comes along with that.
Yeah, it's that overlap.
You need to have someone who knows what they're doing as far as what Mike McDaniel expects in this offense. So Andy Bischoff was never going to make a lot of sense there, but I talked about before, one of the funniest things we ever heard was Andy Bischoff saying basically that Hayden Hurst was among the top receiving tight ends in the entire NFL, with guys like Travis Kelce, and I think he named Darren Waller and several others. But obviously, Hayden Hurst putting together one of the most disappointing free agent addition seasons that we've seen. And the free agents really never worked, with the Chargers as far as Tyler Conklin, and obviously last season either when they brought in Hayden Hurst. But, Tucker Fisk, another guy, right? Undrafted free agent where they were getting pretty usable levels of play from him.
Yeah.
And I think you have to give Andy Bischoff some credit for that. But also part of a run game that never really seemed like it took form and excelled consistently. But that wasn't the only move and the only person to leave, because Matt Zenitz also had this report saying the Ravens are expected to hire Chargers offensive passing coordinator Marcus Brady. Sources tell CBS has worked for the Chargers the last 2 years. Before that was an offensive coordinator with the Colts and a senior offensive assistant with the Eagles. David, this one's interesting because Jesse Minter's telling you he's interested in him, right? Which I think is, something that's significant. But also the Chargers hiring, interviewed him for their open offensive coordinator role as well. So hard to say, how much of a loss this is for the Chargers. It didn't really ever make sense for him to be kind of stuck with Mike McDaniel in an offense that he doesn't know. So I don't think it's like a big loss, but I was surprised to see it was the Ravens and Jesse Minter, saying, hey, like, this is someone we want on our offensive staff.
Very interesting, because I don't know how Jesse Minter looked at the Chargers offense and the spacing of the receivers and the route concepts and said, yep, that's the guy I want to be drawing up plays for the passing game for me with Lamar over in Baltimore. So to me, I don't understand it. I mean, hey, to each their own. Obviously, that Jesse Minter sees some value in what Marcus Brady brought to the table, but if his direct application or contribution to this past Chargers team was trying to devise some good route concepts and proper spacing, that did not materialize at all. So see you later.
Yeah, and like that's the thing too, right? Is like you can't really put all the blame on Greg Roman, like, and then also say it's everyone else. Like at the end of the day, Greg Roman's making the calls, right? It's Greg Roman's playbook. It's Greg Roman's offense. We saw Mark Trestman come in and then leave after a year. Marcus Brady is obviously there the last 2 years. The Chargers interviewing tells him, obviously, to a certain extent, they didn't think it was all his fault, right? Or knew exactly what he was dealing with. Jesse Minter, though, also doesn't have a lot of offensive guys that are clearly connected with him. Right. So I don't think that they're going to be running with Declan Doyle, like the same offense that Greg Roman was running by any means. But I would say that obviously Jesse Minter sees some value in him and the vision he has for his own offense now in Baltimore, which we'll see what that ends up looking like. At the same time, it's hard to look at what the Chargers did as a passing offense the last couple of years and be like, hey, this guy took none of the blame for that, because LA finished 18th in passing yards in 2025 when they had a remotely healthy offensive line. And they finished 19, or in 2025, they had a terrible offensive line, obviously, but in 2024, they were 19th and even worse in passing yards per game. So he was part of the problem. How much of the problem, how much of the blame he deserves for that, I don't know, but it always made sense for Mike McDaniel to bring in his own guy. And now, assuming that's not Adam Gase, right, which we don't think it is right now, he has that title, that carrot to kind of dangle out there for another bright offensive mind, because whoever gets that job would be the most likely successor to Mike McDaniel, theoretically speaking. So let's get to one more here from Matt Zenitz, who says the Cowboys are hiring Chargers defensive quality control coach Robert Muschamp. Sources tell CBS Sports before the Chargers, he worked at the college level with Georgia and Tennessee. Somebody more behind the scenes, David, that we're not super familiar with, but another, kind of young guy. We heard Chris O'Leary say he wanted to keep the coaching staff together. Looks like with Robert Muschamp, it's a little kind of cloudier, whether he just found a better opportunity or the Chargers are parting ways with him.
Yeah, I mean, no way to really know what exactly went into the decision for Muschamp, but as a young coach, obviously still trying to build on his legacy in the NFL as a coach. So we'll see what what he's able to do over there with the Dallas Cowboys.
Yeah, and the thing is we just haven't seen any. Like, he's the only guy we've seen really leave the defensive side since Chris O'Leary became the Chargers defensive coordinator, right, outside of Navarro Bowman, who stepped away for familial reasons, right, and all of that. Yeah. But I would say that, it's hard to always tell what a defensive quality control coach is. But at least in what I've read about and what I know about the position, a lot of it's game planning and a lot of it's looking ahead, right? When you're thinking about a defensive coordinator, a lot of times in a given game week, they are solely focused on the team they're playing that week, and they can't look ahead, right? They have to give that everything that they have. So a quality control coach usually goes ahead and does scouting reports for games that, in the Chargers in this case, have coming up. And on game day, sometimes they can have other roles as well, like telling Jesse Minter what the personnel groupings are that are coming onto the field so he knows what kind of defenses to play.
A big one.
So I think that we don't really know exactly what his role was, but this is something, that is a entry kind of level defensive job, and someone now that we'll see if Chris O'Leary kind of wants to bring another young offensive minded to fill a similar role, but not an insignificant job, as far as game planning, doing the scouting reports, getting the play cut-ups, even drawing up plays at time. And this is someone, that is leaving not for Jesse Minter, but to the Cowboys. So interesting, not something I think really moves the needle either way, but I do think right where you're in right now, though, is kind of seeing how the deck shares are, shuffling right now as we see the Chargers put together their staffs on the offensive and defensive sides, which is always going to be the case when you have a new offensive and defensive coordinator, right?
Yeah.
I don't think they're done yet. I think at this point, the interesting thing will be who they decide to keep, especially on the offensive side, right?
Yeah.
Like if they decide to keep Sanjay Lal, they're telling you something there, right? They're telling you they really believe in him and think he's the best guy. And that
I wouldn't mind it.
Seems like a Jim Harbaugh thing, though, right? Like, where as far as like, hey, you can pick your guys, but this is a guy that we value and would like to keep if you think that he can fit with what they want to do, right? And he's been with several different teams and been in several different offenses. So maybe they think that is a move, but still some open roles on this coaching staff. And we're the only Daily Chargers podcast and we'll be with you here for all of them. So that was a good to kind of get all of the latest on these position coaches and different roles the Chargers are handing out. But tomorrow, since we're a day late, we'll be getting into our buy or sell show. So if you guys want to give us your biggest Charger storylines or overreactions, hit us up at Locked On LAC on Twitter, at Locked On Chargers on Instagram, and our Locked On Chargers Facebook page. Or if you want to, you can call into the voicemail line at 323-524-7924 and give us your 30-second Chargers buy or sell there. And you can also find the show every day on all of our social media. But the best way to do it is by subscribing or following for free on the Locked On Chargers YouTube channel and listening wherever you get your podcast from. And if you want an ad-free version of the audio podcast, you can get that now with the Locked On Everydayer Club, where every day you can get an ad-free version of the audio podcast, and you can find the link in our show notes for $5 a month, but we'll always be 5 days a week on YouTube and wherever you get your podcast for free. But if you want a little extra and you want less ads, you have that option now as well. But we'll be back with you guys tomorrow with Buy or Sell Wednesday. But until then, guys, take it easy and go Bolts.